There are laws that say, no, you can't just run wild and have gay pride parades and dance in front of all the children. You can't do this, okay?
Can't have
I
libraries.
like this. And anybody who's straight will kind of say, okay.
Was it a mistake to move?
Moving so fast, probably. At times, though, your pathway in life takes you places you wouldn't have willingly gone, but through God and providence, you are meant to go through this.
I made a video a couple months ago about Americans who had fled to Russia because they were sick of wokeness in America. And they did this by signing up for a shared values visa that was announced like a couple years ago. And the common thing with these stories that have become public, because apparently there's about 2,000 people who've done this, is these people are not having a good time. Now, we covered a few people last time, but I don't believe we covered this person. There's a guy called Leo Hare who popped up in a recent Sky News report on some of these people who had fled to Russia to escape wokeness. And I find it really interesting, even himself saying he has some regrets about moving there, and just how like delusional these people are, thinking they'll have a better life in like a poorer country, or that country will like give them special status. And it just makes me sad for a lot of their children, not sad for these adults who are horrible bigots who can do what they want and move to Russia and have a great life there. But I also, as I said in my previous video, I find it very funny what they think Russia is. So I won't go over too much what I said, but in the modern conservative imagination, Russia is some sort of white Christian ethno-state where the family is still the family, they're very traditional values, probably full of like trad wives and just very like Mad Men style families like America had in the suburbs in the 60s. They're all Christian, they're all conservative, they all hate gay people, there is no diversity, and it's just some sort of paradise. And what happens to a lot of these people when they move there, they realize, being an immigrant is not always great, especially these people who are often like very, very anti-migration. Yeah, there are lots of people in the world who don't like immigrants, including American immigrants, and maybe American Christians and Russian Orthodox Christians aren't exactly that similar, especially when you don't speak their language at all. And also what I find funny as well, that these people might go to Russia and realize it's not some sort of white ethno-state. Islam is the second biggest religion as well. And this thing they've been sold probably doesn't match up to the reality. And when you are a migrant who doesn't speak the language and you probably don't have many transferable skills that are in huge demand in Russia, you're probably not going to have the best time. And fleeing somewhere because of wokeness might have seemed like a stupid idea, especially when so much of America is run by fanatical anti-LGBT fascists, especially in states like Texas and Florida, and Donald Trump is also the president right now. It seems like a very odd time to move. We're going to get into this little story today. I'll play you some clips of this guy speaking, but Sky News are pretty infamous for just like claiming stuff, so I won't play much footage, but I'll just read you the article. It's just going to be a quick one, hopefully. But Meet the Moral Migrants Relocating from the West to Russia by Ivor Bennett. So the Hare family relocated to Russia from the US 2 years ago because they were persecuted. We were noticing a great upsurge in LGBT-type policies coming into the government, especially the school system. This is where we drew the line in the sand. This is a complete demonic attack against the conservative Christian family, says his wife Chantal. The devout Christians have 3 sons, 17, 15 and 12, and describe themselves as moral migrants. I'm chatting to them at their apartment 150 miles from Moscow, a big change from Texas, where they lived on a farm and had their own shooting range. Talking about Russia's anti-LGBT laws, they say, there are laws that say, no, you can't just run wild and have gay pride parades and dance in front of all the children. You can't do this. I like this, Leo tells me. The family was granted asylum in a ceremony covered on state TV last year, and according to the latest figures, there are about 2,000 Westerners who have applied for this asylum. But this report also has some other people featured. So on the 9th floor of a skyscraper in Moscow, a group of adults are holding pens in their mouths and making strange noises. We're observing a Russian language class that's been put on by an expat club to help its members integrate. Among them is British national Philip Port from Burnley. He runs a visa agency for those going in the opposite direction, Russian to the UK, and has been coming to Russia on and off for 20 years. He says he applied for the shared values visa for both practical and ideological reasons. I love Russia. It's safe as houses. There's no crime. The streets are clean. It's well developed. I'm all for gay rights, don't get me wrong, but I think when they're teaching them to children in school, I've got a 7-year-old son, I don't want him to be influenced in that way. It's unclear how many British have migrated to Russia under this visa, but Philip Hutchinson, whose company Moscow Connect helps Westerners apply for the pathway, says he receives between 50 to 80 inquiries a week from the UK. There's a huge amount of people that are frustrated by the way the country's got in. Taxes are going up and we're giving all this money to Ukraine. Hutchinson stood as a candidate for the Conservatives in last year's local elections, and he moved to Moscow earlier this year with his Russian wife, who couldn't get a UK visa. And asking about the war, he said, "It doesn't bother my clients. As far as I'm concerned, I'm not getting involved in that. You know, I'm not here to deal with politics." Why I like this story, it just highlights so badly the discrepancy between refugees coming to the UK and refugees fleeing the UK and the US. So refugees fleeing many countries in the world who come to the UK looking for a better life, war, famine in Palestine, in Ukraine, in Sudan, in Libya, Syria, these places that have active war zones, Nigeria, Somalia, Kenya, all these places, people fleeing who come over with nothing, who make these journeys with nothing, who put their hands in the hands of organised crime, criminal gangs to try and get on a boat over to UK to be safe and to have a better life. They do all that stuff. These people fleeing to Russia, oh, my kid might be taught that a gay person exists in school. Time to run to Russia right now. That is literally it. These are people are probably not very well in the head, in my opinion anyway, but it just shows you the privilege of society isn't completely to my absolute liking in every way. Time to move to Russia, which is a paradise with clean streets and no crime. There is no crime in Russia. That is absolutely amazing. I wish the Soviet Union could see Russia now. It is probably achieved communism or something. But just going on to the article a bit more, their heirs said they were scammed $50,000 by the family who put them up when they arrived in Russia, and their 2 oldest sons have actually returned to America because they couldn't find a school. The family weren't aware that children have to speak Russian to actually get a state education. So I'm happy for those kids. I'm happy for them in 2 ways. I'm happy for them they'll be away from those parents. So hopefully, if they do have these terrible views about the world from this indoctrination, they can just be normal people. And also, I'm happy they don't have to fucking grow up in Russia when they definitely don't have to, because they just don't speak the language. They probably don't understand the culture as much, and they probably have a terrible life stuck with their family and stuck with their dad. So I'm happy they went back, and I just feel bad there are some kids who are stuck with these crazy parents in Russia. Not saying Russia is the worst place ever in the world to live, but if you're fleeing America to Russia to start at relatively near to the bottom of society because of wokeness, then you are doing bad as a parent, and you've basically failed as a parent, in my opinion. Just another article that came out recently, NBC News, US family moved to Russia to escape liberal culture war, where this Leo Hare guy spoke a bit more, and he says, "It was the promise of a country that would not promote the LGBT agenda. We like the fact that LGBT is basically outlawed here in official ways." His wife says in this interview, "When we left, it was final. We don't plan to come back. There will not be anything to come back to." And it just goes on about their actual initial stay. Their initial plan was to rent an apartment in Moscow, but it fell through as soon as they boarded the plane. And they spent a bitterly cold winter caring for chickens, horses, and rabbits on a farm 70 miles south of Moscow in exchange for free board. At one point, they even had to bring their goats and their newborns inside their cabin to keep the animals from dying. Leo Hare thought their troubles were over when the landlord's son offered a generous interest rate for investing their 50 grand nest egg in a car import business, but they only saw one payment before he stopped sending the money and refused to return it. The couple went to the police and the local court to file complaints, but they say that they received no help from law enforcement. And Leo Hare also said they are currently homeschooling their children, and it would have been a deal breaker if they knew about the school restrictions. So that is absolutely insane. So thankfully, like I said, the kids, some of them escaped, but he wouldn't have moved to Russia if he knew his kids wouldn't be allowed to start school without speaking Russian. So it's insane when he ran away from school in America. He ran away from his kids being taught at public school because they were being indoctrinated in the woke agenda. How about spend that 50 grand and, I don't know, get your kids private education or homeschool your kids in America or some shit like that, rather than drag them out to Russia to work on a farm in the brutal winter and sleep in the same room as goats because the livestock would have died if it didn't share your lodgings and stuff. Sounds like absolute hell, and I don't feel sorry for these people, but the Christian conservative brainwashing of these people and so many people like them is just so insane. And we can talk about that, and we have on this channel for a long time, like the capitalist element and just the religious element. But I said in my video about why we still need atheism, for a lot of these people, there's just no reasoning with them because of their religion. Like, think about all these things they went through. Think about even entertaining this as a real thing. Like, it's not based on economics. Like, they're not moving to Russia for a better financial life. And you can't even reason with them in that aspect of like class and material conditions. Is they're just doing it because they're brainwashed by religion. So that's why I always think it's important still with the left-wing argument. You have to still challenge organized religion because it's always going to make people even act against their material interests, which seem bizarre. Because you're like, how the fuck could you do that? But they will still go and do it. So yeah, these people going to Russia and getting the reality of what it is like to be like an immigrant and not have much, you hope it would make them more empathetic to the plights of migrants in their own country, the plight of migrants around the world, the plight of refugees. I somehow doubt it because they will always still think they are an exception or special or something like that. But just a little update to the story. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. And if you made it this far, thank you for watching.